Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Claudia, sí me escuchan bien, ¿correcto?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Perfectamente, Miguel.
Yes, loud and clear, Miguel.
Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start our crop update 2021. In truth, a couple of years back, in Santiago, office has been organizing these updates on winter wheat crops or harvest, usually mid-July. It's extremely important to count on first-hand information as the one we're getting today about the quality of the wheat available on the hard red winter and soft red winter classes. We've been seeing a lot of volatility in the market recently. More so, we think that information is power, and therefore, millers and buyers in general in our region should be extremely well informed to cope with that. I'd like to express my appreciation to the wheat commissions from Kansas and the Oklahoma Wheat Commission. Thank you so much for providing us these unconditional support and for joining us today. I would like to also express my appreciation to all the U.S. Wheat Associates team from Washington and Santiago office to afford the possibility of delivering this information to our customers in Latin America. Before proceeding, I'd like to remind you that at the bottom of your screen, you can see and find a globe, and if you click on it, you're going to select the languages you want to listen to the presentations. Without much ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Aaron Harris from Kansas Wheat Commission, who's going to greet and say a few words before passing the floor to the other speakers.
Thank you for being today with us, and please go ahead and thank you very much again.
Well, thank you, Miguel, and good morning, everyone. Good morning to all of our friends in South America from here in Manhattan, Kansas. It's glad to be able to speak with you this morning. I hope all of you and all your families have been safe and healthy, and we're grateful that we have this technology available. So from long distance, we can give you an update on the wheat crop here in the central United States. So we certainly appreciate this opportunity. It's been a very interesting harvest, particularly here in the central United States. A lot of wet weather has delayed the harvest. So here we are today is July 15th, and harvest is still underway in parts of Kansas. And that's probably about 5 to 7 days later than it should be. But we're going to give you several updates on the crop. Let me share my screen here and start sharing my slides.
We can see you perfect.
Okay, great. Well, here's a brief look at the agenda. We'll have a report from Dr. Romulo Lollato, who is our wheat production specialist at Kansas State University here in Manhattan. And what we've asked Romulo to do this morning is speak specifically about some research undergoing in Kansas to improve the quality of the wheat that we grow here in the central United States. I think most of you hopefully know that we constantly strive to improve the quality of wheat that we are exporting to our customers. And I think we're making some great progress on that. This will be a particularly high yielding crop in Kansas and Oklahoma. And the verdict is out yet on the quality. I think it will perform very well, and we'll hear more about that. But we wanted Romulo to give an update on some of the research that he is doing to improve the quality and work with farmers on that. Then our friend from Oklahoma, Mike Schulte, is going to give you an update on the report on the crop in Oklahoma and the harvest that is mostly done in Oklahoma. My boss, CEO Justin Gilpin, couldn't be with us live today, although he may be on the phone. He recorded some comments last week about the HRW and soft red winter wheat crop, and we'll view that video. And then we'll have someone from the Anderson's Trading Group join us in a little bit. It won't be Matt Murphy as it shows on the agenda there. It will be Sean Campbell, the Anderson's Trading Group, to give us kind of a market perspective, which is also always interesting. And then when we wrap up the program, we're going to try to have a live report from one of our farmers out from a wheat field in northwest Kansas and tell us how the harvest is going out in that part of the state. So greetings to you this morning from the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center. The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center, hopefully some of you online have had the privilege of being here, and hopefully the rest of you can visit sometime, is a research facility here in Manhattan, Kansas, built by Kansas wheat farmers, a $15 million research facility that partners with Kansas State University to work on wheat research and advance those wheat varieties that our farmers grow. This is an overhead picture of the research facility that has laboratories and greenhouse complexes here in Manhattan, Kansas. Here's a photo of the greenhouses lit up at night. So this is a big investment by wheat farmers in Kansas to help improve not only the yield for the farmers, but the quality of the wheat that we grow and sell to our export customers. So a quick refresher on the Kansas Wheat Commission, who I work for. We are a checkoff agency. We were created in 1957. And we collect 2 pennies or 2 cents on every bushel of wheat that is sold in the state of Kansas. So when a farmer sells their wheat, whether that's to a grain elevator or a flour mill, or in this case, many farmers are selling wheat to cattle feedlots, 2 pennies out of every bushel sold comes to the Kansas Wheat Commission. And that's what we use to support organizations such as U.S. Wheat Associates. We're members of U.S. Wheat Associates, and really value our friends in the Santiago office in the work they do providing assistance to you, our customers in South America. So this is a quick map refresher on how the wheat harvest progresses through the central U.S. The green dots in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas represent hard red winter wheat. There is a decent amount of soft red winter wheat that is grown in the eastern 1/4 of Kansas this year, a lot of bushels of soft red winter wheat. But the harvest starts in May in Texas and works its way north through Kansas and Oklahoma, westwards towards Colorado. It'll be underway now in Colorado and Nebraska. And then it moves towards the northern plains, the winter wheat crop in South Dakota and eventually Montana. You've probably seen in the news, unfortunately, there's a severe drought in the northern plains of the U.S. This spring and summer, and that has certainly affected the wheat crop. We won't focus on that today, but here in the southern plains, we've actually received some fairly beneficial rains in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Unfortunately, in some cases, too much rain, and Mike will probably mention that, and that's caused a delay in our harvest situation here in the central United States. Specifically in Kansas, our wheat harvest starts in the southern part of the state. The red pin you see on the map there is where I am, Manhattan, Kansas. Each of those brown dots on the map basically represents a wheat field. So you can see the wheat production areas of the state of Kansas are mostly in the western 2/3 of the state. So our harvest will start around Wichita, which is kind of the wheat capital of the world, down there in south central Kansas. The wheat harvest starts in south central Kansas and moves its way north and west, and finally finishes in the northwestern part of the state. And that's where we'll have a report from a farmer towards the end of this presentation. Okay, I will stop there with my comments, and I do want to introduce my friend, Dr. Romulo Lollato, who is our Extension Wheat Production Specialist here at Kansas State University. Romulo is a native of Brazil. He'll be speaking in English this morning and having that translated into Portuguese and Spanish for you, but Romulo's done a really amazing set of work on intensive management of wheat by farmers, where they really focus on the agronomics of growing wheat with the goal of increasing yield and increasing that protein and quality. Really some groundbreaking work, and it's starting to pay off, and Romulo will have some examples of that. So good morning, Romulo. I will stop my slides and allow you to give your presentation.
Excellent. Yes. Good morning, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this call. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. And while I do that, just wanted to take the chance to say that I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, sharing with you some of the work that we are doing. And I named this presentation Improved Agronomy for Wheat Quality. And that's really what we're going to talk about, is how we are working to educate growers in how can they grow the highest yield possible that they can still profitably, and with the highest quality as well. And I guess just as a quick background for everyone on the call there, it's important to highlight that here in the US, the university, it doesn't only have the role of teaching students, so we do have that role, of course, but we also have the role of educating our stakeholders, educating our growers. And that's my appointment with the university, is out there working directly with the growers and trying to educate them in how to grow the best wheat that they can. So whenever we talk about wheat quality, right, the three main things that will, of course, affect wheat quality is the environment, that can take up to 70% of the quality can actually come from that environment. And we have variety selection, about up to 25%, and management as well. Sometimes up to 20-25% of that quality can come from the management. So not much that we can do about environment, but we can do about variety selection and management practices. So I'm going to focus most of the presentation on the management piece of this, but I have a few thoughts here on the variety selection as well. So let's start with the variety, right? And here in Kansas, and not only in Kansas, but Oklahoma, Colorado, and the majority of the Great Plains region here, whenever we talk about variety, let's look into the breeding program. And this is a busy slide. I just want you to focus on the different colors here. This slide is only showing the progress of a variety development, right? From the cross that the breeder does all the way to the variety release here in purple. So in the beginning, the first 5 years or so, there are too many lines. The breeders are not necessarily looking at the quality at that point in time. But whenever we come here to this individual plant, short rows, and forward, so for about half of that breeding cycle, there are different quality selection criteria that you see here on the right-hand side. So depending on the phase that is shown in yellow, we have a different selection criteria for quality. What really this is telling us is, don't worry about the details here, is that our breeders are concerned with releasing high quality wheat. If something that is very high yielding but doesn't have the quality there, it will get rejected before it makes out. So the breeders are concerned with that. So every variety that is released, it has a minimal quality standard that it needs to adhere to. Beyond the breeding program, once these varieties are released, we go to the farmer field, and the farmers, they need to make decisions, right? Nowadays, here in Kansas, we might have over 50 varieties that a farmer can choose from. And so some thoughts here on how are our farmers making these decisions. They are accounting for that quality in their decision-making process when they're selecting 1, 2, or 3 out of those 50 options that they have to choose from. And that's what this graph is kind of showing us here. They start here, so most of their decision-making process is going to rely on yield record. What's the adaptability of that variety to that region? So it needs to have proven yield record that's going to work well for them. And they go to the next step, where they will look a little bit more in detail. Once they have, okay, this variety is high yielding, how will we do in my system and crop rotation? What's its tolerance to diseases and pests, maturity, and so on. And then finally, there is the quality piece as well, right? If there is a market demand, so for example, in the recent years, I believe in 4 out of 5 years, we had some very high yielding crops. And so whenever there was protein premiums, definitely farmers will take that into consideration in their variety selection as well. And we're trying to educate growers. We're out there with them over 100 times a year doing field days and crop schools to try and educate growers in how they can make a variety selection that will not only ensure high yield, but high quality as well. But not only variety selection, how can they manage the crop for that as well, for high yield and high quality? And that's where we're getting into the second part of my few slides here, where I'm going to share with you some of the information that we developed in the last few years in terms of managing the agronomics of the crop to produce high yield and high quality. So very briefly here, we're going to touch base on three main initiatives, right? And you see that a couple of them have to do with fertility management. So how can we manage nitrogen to ensure we have high yield and high quality, managing nitrogen and sulfur as well. And finally, as Aaron was mentioning before, an intensive management. If we're looking at several managements at a time, how is that actually affecting our yield and quality? So starting with nitrogen, because nitrogen is the nutrient that has the biggest impact in the crop. And as you can see here, right, this is an example of a crop that is getting either no nitrogen or a high nitrogen rate on the right-hand side. Very same variety, everything else is the same, except a very different nitrogen rate here. We see that if you are a farmer, you definitely want your crop to be looking like the right-hand side and not like the left-hand side, especially as it comes to harvest maturity that you see here, your zero nitrogen out there. You see you have a very thin crop, not many heads out there, not much mass on the right-hand side. We have a much healthier looking crop with many more heads, many more kernels, and definitely a much higher yielding as well. So summarizing some of our research on the nitrogen management over several locations, several years, and what we're telling our growers, right, is if we look at our nitrogen and how it relates to yield here, there is this phase where increases in nitrogen rate will also result in increasing yield, and then it plateaus out. So there is an optimum there. Same thing for protein. We have an increasing phase. As we increase nitrogen, we increase our protein as well, and then it levels out. So if we look at these two things together, our data on nitrogen management for yield and for protein, essentially this is what we come up with. Yield is shown in red, protein is shown in blue. So if you're a farmer and you're increasing your nitrogen input, your yield also goes up. And it maximizes, it levels out earlier on, right? Your protein increases at a slower rate and it keeps increasing for a longer period. So what this tells us is that we need more nitrogen to maximize our protein as compared to the nitrogen that we need to maximize our grain yield. Meaning that if growers are expecting that they might have a protein premium there, they should be managing with a slightly higher nitrogen rate than they would usually if you're just looking at grain yield. So this is the type of information that we are educating our growers. And we're giving them tools to measure this in season. So just as a brief comment here, if a grower goes out and he samples his crop, right, at the flag leaf emergence, he pulls flag leaves out of that crop and measure how much nitrogen it has in the flag leaf. It gives them a pretty good plateau, a pretty good indication if it's going to be deficient for protein or not. So if it's less than about 3.5%, they know that they probably should add a little bit more nitrogen out there to maximize their protein. So they can actually affect that in season. Now, nitrogen is an important component, but it doesn't tell the entire story, right? Because we need a balanced ratio of nitrogen and sulfur in the grain, because sulfur is also going to be it is part of those proteins in the wheat kernel. And so the nitrogen to sulfur ratio, it impacts wheat quality as well, right? The nitrogen uptake is going to produce amino acids in that plant. If there is a balanced nitrogen to sulfur ratio, usually we have a good quality grain protein. If we don't have a good ratio, if we have an imbalanced ratio, then the protein is not going to be as high quality. And in the US in particular, sulfur has been a big problem because with the Clean Air Act that we had in the 1980s or so, we had less emission of sulfur to the atmosphere. And so there's less sulfur coming down in the rain as well. So if we see this balance here in purple, we see the amount of sulfur coming down in the rainfall. In yellow, how much the wheat crop is removing. You can see that the crop removal now is much higher than what we have coming down in the atmosphere, meaning that since about 2000s or so, we are in a deficit. So more and more, it's common to see this type of scenario here in Kansas. We're traveling in the spring around the state, and we can see pretty clearly fields that look very light green because of that sulfur deficiency. And so very common scenario, and sulfur is going to impact not only yield, but quality as well. So with the support of the Kansas Wheat Commission, we went ahead and we did a 3-year project here where we're looking at the interaction of nitrogen and sulfur. So if we're giving different nitrogen rates to the crop and different sulfur rates to the crop as well, how is that affecting the yield and the grain quality of different varieties? Now let's take a look at the field, right? How does this look in the field? Very similar to what I just showed for you in nitrogen. So if you see these 2 plots, these 2 wheat crops here, they received the exact same treatments, everything else, except the left-hand side did not receive sulfur, and the right-hand side received only about 22 kilograms of sulfur per hectare. So very, very low amounts. And you see this huge difference in how the crop is looking like. Again, as a farmer, I want my crop to look like the right-hand side, especially towards maturity. You see here, much more, just because of that sulfur, many more heads out there, much healthier crop, higher yielding as well. And essentially, just if I summarize what we found in this research, is that if you look at the gray line here, it's crops that did not receive sulfur, and regardless of our nitrogen rate, we could be putting as much as we wanted. There was no effect on yield. Once we give some sulfur to the crop, now we improved our yield considerably, and the crop is now responding to the nitrogen as well. Now, not only that, that's from the farmer perspective, that's very important. They are seeing, well, I have a very nice yield gain from this sulfur addition. Now let's look at the protein, right? Let's look at the quality of the grain. And here we're looking at the nitrogen to sulfur ratio. Remember, a good nitrogen to sulfur ratio, you're maintaining crop quality around that 15 or so. If you have more than that, you have a poor quality, right? So your grain quality without the sulfur was much more poor than with the sulfur. And this is reflected in the farinograph stability, right? What we're looking at here, we have the farinograph stability, the gray points with 0 sulfur. You can see that it ranged from 6 to 12 minutes. Once we gave sulfur to the crop, it went from 10 all the way to 18 minutes. So again, very important point here, the farmers can manage their sulfur to really maximize their yield and improve their quality as well with a much higher farinograph stability just from adding that sulfur. And finally, reaching to our last set of slides here, where we're looking at a more comprehensive, intensive management of the crop. We're looking at the different varieties and how they're responding to management in terms of yield and quality. Very briefly, what we're wanting to do here is a stepwise increase in management intensity, right? We're starting with our farmer practice. So in average, what are our growers doing, right? In terms of nitrogen and fungicide as well. Then we are adding fertility and seeing how much yield and quality can we gain from that. Then we're adding a fungicide and seeing how that affects our yield and quality, adding a couple of fungicides, and finally all the way to micronutrients. Wanting to teach the farmers here, how should we be managing our crop to maximize our yield, and also how is that impacting the quality of the crop. And if I would summarize all the 3 years of research that was funded by the Kansas Wheat Commission as well here in several locations, this is from a farmer perspective, that's how much gain they have in yields here, right? Going from his farmer practice, business as usual, to enhanced fertility here, they're gaining about 500 kilos per hectare on average. If they're going from that enhanced fertility on the stair to the fungicide, they're gaining another 900. And then the remaining, the other fungicide, micronutrients and everything, they were about even. Right? So really the biggest gains that we have are here in the beginning, right? We have more room to manage fertility, more room to manage fungicide and increase our yield. Now, how is that relating to quality? If we look at the increasing yield that we have here on the left-hand side and increasing quality or increasing protein, we usually think of these two as negative, right? If you have more yield, you have less protein. Well, on this project, we're seeing that through increases in fertility, we can get both increase in yield and increase in protein as well. That's why we see this positive line here. If we go to the next step, our fungicide, right? We have increase in yield, and although protein was the same, we have increase in 1,000 kernel weight, which for the milling industry is important, right? Protein, perhaps more important for the baking, 1,000 1,000 kernel weight, more important for the milling industry. But again, within one of those quality parameters, we're still improving both yield and quality. And these samples are now being evaluated for milling and baking. And I have just some quick slides here as well. That we have another project that we're just looking at 2 packages, either our farmer practice or our full intensive, with several additions of different management practices there. Right, and overall, several years and locations, we were able, again, to increase yields, a good 900 kilograms per hectare there. Increase protein. So you see here that our protein increased from about 12 to about 14%. So 2 percentage points in protein gain from that intensive management. And our farinograph stability as well. We're not only increasing protein, but we're increasing the protein quality in our low management, about 10 minutes, all the way to close to 13 minutes there in our high management. So that wraps up the slides for me here. I just wanted to really highlight that we are out there with the growers several times a year, just trying to educate them in how they can grow the best yield that they can with the best quality as well. So giving them tools to manage the crop for yield and quality. My contact information is in the screen. If you're on Twitter or Facebook at KSU Wheat, you can reach me out there and be on pair with what's going on in Kansas wheat throughout the season. Thank you.
Thank you, Romulo. That great presentation, and I think that's information I wanted to share with the group this morning. You know, we've always known that a higher yielding crop tends to be lower protein, and opposite of that. But what Romulo's research is showing, and what our farmers are doing with this intensive management, we do have some control. The holy grail is higher yield and higher protein, and we're working towards that and working on your behalf to improve the quality. So some higher yielding wheat in Kansas this year. It's going to be lower protein, same thing in Oklahoma, but we're eager to see how it performs. I think that protein is going to be of a very high quality and is, I think, going to perform very well for you. So and Romulo is continuing this research, which is funded by Kansas wheat farmers, and we just want you to know that we're working on constantly improving the quality of the product that we export to you, our customers. So thank you, Romulo. I think he'll probably stick around, so if we have some questions submitted later via chat, we can run those by Romulo. So at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to my friend Mike Schulte. Mike is the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Wheat Commission and is joining us this morning to give you an update on how the wheat harvest went in Oklahoma.
And Aaron, I think I'm going to have you pull up my slides for me, if that's okay. And can you put them in?
There you go.
Oh, perfect. All right, and I'll just tell you when to advance. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to you all. I am so glad to be here today to discuss with you the crop quality conditions of the southern plains of the United States. And my first slide just has some new wheat varieties that are coming out of our public research program at Oklahoma State University. And much like Kansas Wheat Commission, we also are funded by the wheat producers in the state of Oklahoma at 2 cents per bushel, and are one of the 17 state wheat commissions that fund U.S. Wheat Associates and have close relationships, certainly with our Santiago office in Chile and in the South American region. And so with that, I think I will go ahead and advance to my next slide. While we strive to create better quality, my experience in this position has been making friends and then making sales in that order. The needs and communication through our associations have always been what has allowed us our greatest success. In my 12 years here, it's been a wonderful opportunity to meet with the millers and bakers of South America, and we appreciate your continued support and our relationships with you and value our continued partnerships. Your support to the U.S. wheat farmers does not go unnoticed. Next slide, please. Oklahoma harvest production summary for our region. Oklahoma wheat production totaled 2.9 tons, up from 2.8 million tons in 2020, but is running at the same line as where we were in 2019. The statewide yield averaged 1.08 tons per hectare, up 1% from last year, and harvested hectares in our region for grain is 1 million hectares, up a 0.5% last year. Next slide, please. Oklahoma winter wheat seedings for 2021. The crop is estimated at 1.7 million hectares, up 1% from last year. So in our region and in the southern plains of the United States, we have kind of seen a decline in some of the wheat production areas due to other crops, but our harvest this year and the last couple of years certainly has been very strong. We've had really good yields, and so we always like to reiterate that we have plenty of wheat for our producers and our customers in South America to source from. Next slide, please. Oklahoma quarterly grain stocks. So stocks of wheat in all positions on June 1 were at 1.8 million tons, up 11% from this period in 2019 at 1.7 million tons. Off-farm wheat stocks at 1.86 million tons were 11% higher than June 1st of this period last year in 2020. And so we've seen these increases slightly on our quarterly grain stocks positions, and I think that is just an indication of the higher yields that we have seen last year and this year in these regions. Next slide, please. So I do have some data from Plains Grains Incorporated. These are regional tests across the United States that are conducted from the collection agency that provides this information to U.S. wheat. And so we are just in the early testing phases of the Southern Plains. And so we have 113 different tests from several different grain sheds from Texas all the way into now central Kansas. And so our test weights are showing us currently an average for this region of 81.5 kilograms per hectoliter. Certainly extremely strong test weights for this harvest season. It was just a perfect year for grain fill and weather conditions. The crop never really stressed at all. And so we are certainly going to have large berry size, good test weights, those good attributes. When we look at protein for this region, we're probably looking at an 11% average currently right now. Certainly, there are different areas where we have higher pockets of protein. There are areas where we have lower pockets of protein. But overall, based on how the crop is coming in, when you consider it never stressing and us having all these other good quality attributes, we really think that probably an 11.3 protein percent is still going to be excellent for this season. And the functionality we are hopeful is going to be there based on also the work that we've been doing that was mentioned before from Aaron. Next slide, please. So our kernel diameters are ranging from 2.65 to 2.71 millimeters. We're going to have really nice kernel size on this crop. And we can go to the next slide. Thousand kernel weight, also strong this year, anywhere from 31.3 to 32.7. We can go to the next slide. And our proteins, again, ranging from 11 to 11.3. We can go to next slide. Test weights, which were discussed earlier, ranging from 80.5 to 81.7. We can go to the next slide. And so this, I think, really breaks the crop out currently with where we're looking at from 2021 to 2020 averages. And overall, if you look at the test weights, the shrunken and broken material, we are a little higher in foreign material in some areas this year. But if you look at damaged kernels, if you look at the average weights, the diameters, as well as the average hardness of the kernels, really the crop is going to mirror much of what we saw last year in those characteristics from this region of the Southern Plains. If we get into falling number, early test indicators are showing us we are lower in many instances than we were last year at this time. However, we are continuing to do some solvent retention capacity testing, and I think that the indications right now currently are that there's going to be a break somewhere between that 11% to that 11.3% area. I think anything higher than 11.3% is going to certainly be more advantageous to have higher functionality characteristics. And so we feel like that the capabilities are going to be there. If we have lower proteins that aren't doing well, probably that's already just going to go into the feed market. That's also going to be characteristics representative of when the crop was harvested. Much of the crop was harvested in a timely manner, about 85 to 90% of this crop, while in our region we have about 5% left. The 5% that's left has probably been rained on, and we've had some of those issues that millers would not want. That's solely going to go into the feed market, so we're not going to have a lot of quality issues. If you want to look at 1,000 kernel weights, again, 32.3 grams, certainly a good 1,000 kernel weight. And we can go on to the next slide. And then our falling number averages in these ranges, as well as our kernel hardness averages. And so again, we are looking at functionalities, but early indications are showing that even on the lower proteins that we're going to have favorable functionality characteristics from this crop. Next slide. This is just a slide that talks about the public research program at Oklahoma State University and the work and focus that we put on end-use quality functionalities. There are certain characteristics that we strive for in regards to protein quantities and protein qualities. And if we don't reach those bars on those varieties in the testing program, they are not released to the producer. And so we are seeing this emphasis placed on the importance of variety for functionality, and we are working with elevator locations and producers to be able to source these varieties that are going to be more advantageous for the South American millers and bakers. Next slide. And then we are also doing some work with the Wheat Marketing Center, which is the technical crossroads of the international wheat industry, providing technical training and grower workshops. I put this slide up just to show that we have been working on several different product lines, but have had some success on 2 controls of Showdown Hard Red Winter Wheat and then a Showdown Hard White Winter Wheat for tortilla testing. And so we can go to the next slide. Next slide. Oh. And so the conclusions from these tests were that the Showdown Hard White Winter offered strong dough strength with good tolerance to press and final texture, but had inferior opacity. And the Showdown Hard Red Winter and Hard White were maybe not specifically standalone tortilla flours, but they showed great possibilities as suitable or tortilla blends. And so we think as we see an increase in these varieties, both of Hard White and Hard Red Winter, that this is going to be something that the industry is going to be looking forward to in this region for testing and evaluation on varieties such as this. Next slide. And then this is just a picture of our commission facility where we do consumer promotions, end-use functionalities, flavor profile studies, research initiatives for plant science, health and wellness, and education. And we can go on to the next slide. And I did have a message from our U.S. Wheat Secretary Treasurer, Michael Peters, that during these challenging times with the pandemic, we strive to provide the best wheat product to our foreign customers. We in Oklahoma are especially thankful for the continued friendships of South America and hope to continue our work in partnership with you.
Okay. Is that your, thanks for the information, Mike. I think that's great information. Looks like you've got maybe one more slide left.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. That'll work, yes. This is just promotional materials and contact information for the Oklahoma Wheat Commission website.
Okay, great. Well, appreciate that good information from you on the crop. A lot of good data, and of course, there's more data that will be coming in as the testing progresses. So, the CEO of Kansas Wheat, Justin Gilpin, is out of state this week, but he recorded a video last week, Friday, talking about the hard red winter wheat crop and the soft red winter wheat crop in the U.S. and some of the market situations. And we're going to play that video for you now. Some of the data may be a little bit outdated in it, but it's still good information. So,
Thank you, Aaron.
Hello from Manhattan, Kansas. Sorry I'm not able to join you live on this virtual meeting, but I very much appreciate the opportunity to be able to present with you today the hard red winter and soft red winter wheat quality and the information that we know at this point. First of all, I really appreciate you all taking the time to learn a little bit more and engage about this year's wheat crop out of the United States. And from our perspective and representing wheat farmers who are just now starting to wrap up the wheat harvest here in Kansas, Your business relationship is extremely important to us and very much valued. Unfortunately, we have to do this virtually. We very much look forward to the opportunity to be able to do it in person with you, either in your country or hopefully also be able to host you here in Manhattan, Kansas soon. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the sampling background that goes into the crop quality reports, current crop conditions that we're seeing, and some of the early data that's starting to come in that you're probably seeing through some of your reports from some of your suppliers as you learn about this year's crop. To give you a better idea of why we put together a lot of this information and try to share it with you. It's very important that we share the harvest information in a very detailed, timely format while we're telling the perspective from our farmers, that farmer story. The intent is the more information you have, the better informed customer you are, is ultimately the better customer you'll be in the future. Everything we try to do with the data and the harvest reports is to try to provide as much transparent, reliable market and crop quality information as possible through our partners with U.S. Wheat Associates. This is all made available through seminars like today, and also the weekly harvest reports and price reports that are available through email and on their websites. As always, we are working for farmers at State League Commissions and U.S. Wheat Associates. We want to be a resource for you for any questions or information that we might be able to assist you with. So the data I'm going to talk about today is very early in process, but just to give you an idea how the samples are collected for the soft red winter and hard red winter wheat harvest and what ultimately goes into the crop quality reports. All of those samples happen right at harvest time. You think about the hard red winter wheat samples that they began being sampled in May in Texas, and then will be collected throughout the month of August all the way up through Montana. Same goes with the soft red winter wheat crop. Soft red winter wheat harvest starts in the southeast United States. The samples collections were started in Texas and Arkansas, and will go all the way up to where they're being harvested now, up into the Midwest, into Illinois and Indiana. All of the hard red winter wheat data is collected on the Plains Grains website. And then ultimately, all of the data with all of the classes of wheat will be made available through the crop quality booklets on the U.S. wheat. The testing that's done for all the hard red winter wheat is done in the USDA Wheat Quality Lab located in Manhattan, Kansas. So some of you have had the opportunity to visit this lab. It's recently been renovated, and wanted to just give you a snapshot of the mills and the quality lab here in Manhattan, Kansas, where these hard red winter wheat samples, once they're collected, they go through grain inspection, are then sent here for milling and ultimately flour, dough, and bake testing. All the soft red winter wheat analysis happens at Great Plains Analytical Lab, located in Kansas City, Missouri. They have a very in-depth quality lab that works with industry, and we consider them a very good partner for this soft red winter wheat quality data. Once all of the data is put together, you'll be able to find that available on the U.S. wheat, but also the Plains Grains Inc. website. All of the hard red winter wheat data specifically is going to be located on the Plains Grains Inc. website. We're very proud of the fact that we're actually going to have increased data available as it's located by grain shed throughout on the maps. You can see how throughout the process of collecting the samples through Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. You can go in and look at not just this year's historical data from this grain shed, but past years for comparison. And ultimately, all of the hard red winter and soft red winter wheat data will be available through the wheat quality booklets in multiple languages for your use and for your benefit. Just to take a quick look at the U.S. winter wheat crop. Talk a little bit about the crop conditions, harvest progress, planted acreage, and yield expectations, and then touch on briefly at the end early harvest reports, quality data, and some market thoughts. It's important to think about this winter wheat conditions. The roller coaster ride that this crop was taken on. The fact that early on when it was planted last September and October, crop conditions were very low, and the expectations were a little bit nervous as we began, as this crop was planted and had emergence going into winter dormancy. In comparison to the last 5 years, we were actually behind in crop breeding conditions. As the crop came out of dormancy, we had the roller coaster ride continued as we had some dryness. But then when we got into the month of May, the conditions for the Southern Plains hard winter wheat crop really began to improve, and in the soft red winter wheat condition areas. One thing I always wanted to point out is when you look at USDA reports that characterize winter wheat crop, whether winter wheat crop ratings or harvest progress, it's important to note that USDA put all of the hard red winter and soft red winter wheat and characterize it as winter wheat in the crop rating report. So as you look at the breakdown of those reports, it's important to know which state grows which class of wheat on a regional basis. As of now, the winter wheat harvest is nearing about half of one of the most recent winter wheat crop ratings that are done weekly on Monday afternoons by USDA. You can see Kansas is nearing 75 to 85% complete. Colorado is nearing 33% complete. And if you look at the designated with the soft red wheat is making significant progress in Illinois and Indiana. This has kind of been a slower start for this year's winter wheat harvest. So just this past weekend, we were glad to see progress being made and getting through some of the tough conditions that we've had and some of the early challenges that the soft red and hard red winter wheat crops have seen. In general, even though this year is going to have challenges, overall production is expected to have trend line yields for the total winter wheat harvest when combined. There are going to be regional differences. Some areas that are going to do better than others have higher yields than others just because of environmental conditions. But in general, we're going to see better production with hard red winter wheat, soft red winter wheat, and it's going to you'll see that as it will also tend to build stocks for hard red wheat and soft red. When you look at the prominent states that grow the hard red winter wheat, you can see one of the reasons why with those better yields you're going to see an increased production. Kansas was increased the planted acres this year by almost 10%. Colorado was up almost 8%, and Montana was up over 12% on planted acres. Now, with Kansas and Colorado having improved yields, it's going to make their production year on year. So as this gets updated in the July and August production reports, there could be a continuing trend of seeing the hard red winter wheat crop production estimates increase slightly, although there is going to be offset by, as we all know, the challenges that we're going to see in spring wheat production. A breakdown of the states, if you look at the blue states year on year, these are the states that are going to have that because of the drought that was present last year and last year's hard red winter wheat crop. You're going to see significant increases in yield in Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska. Then over in the soft red winter wheat areas, we're seeing increases year on year in the soft red winter wheat production breakdown by state. Overall class breakdown, see hard red winter wheat production will be increasing year on year. Soft red winter wheat is going to be the third year now increasing since we had that in 2019. One challenge area because of the drought in the Pacific Northwest potentially can have some market impacts will be the soft white winter wheat production. That's going to be down significantly and continue to get a little bit lower as we look at the month reports yet to come. So the U.S. Wheat Weekly Harvest Reports gives you an idea, a snapshot of how harvest is progressing. But it also starts to incrementally show you where we're at on our samples that have been collected and the data that's being analyzed. So for hard red winter wheat, in the most recent crop report, harvest report that came out on Friday, you'll see that we're still less than half of the samples that we expect to collect and have in this for the hard red winter. Significant theme with this year proteins will be lower than average, lower than last year. This may trend higher as we get up into the drought areas in South Dakota and in Montana. But for the Southern Plains, a majority of the production in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado will be below last year and below average. Test weights have been pretty good compared to where we were in years past. So that has been promising, but there are pockets where there has been some challenges with lower test weights, and because of rain and high humidities, there are some areas that we are hearing intermittent reports of sprouting damage, which the sample collection shows falling numbers were lower than where you'd like to see them. We anticipate as I've gotten out of those areas to see the falling number be increasing to more what you would expect to see. The good news about the sprouting that has been identified in some pockets of hard red winter wheat is the high amount of wheat that's going into feed because of the tight supply balance sheet with corn. So there is a very steady outlet for any wheat that might have been off quality to be bought up and used in the feed markets and domestically in the United States and feed industry. So we don't anticipate a lot of those challenges to make it into the marketing and commercial channels. Soft red winter wheat, you can see soft red winter wheat. The harvest report is over half collected and in the process of being tested. 182 samples out of the expected over 300. Test weights look to be improved over versus average, maybe similar to last year. Proteins are very similar to last year and what you would expect to see. Just like the hard red winter wheat crop, there were areas in the southern United States where we had a little too much rain right at the harvest time that did identify some lower falling number wheats. But as we're moving farther north, we're getting into the high states. We're hoping the harvest can progress a little bit faster and we'll see a little bit better quality. So I would anticipate the falling number to increase slightly, but it is a quality issue that you're going to want to keep an eye on and work with your suppliers on for this marketing year. Also, another quality issue is where vomitoxin seems to be a similar year as what we've had in years past, where it's important to work with your buyer or your suppliers on vomitoxin specifications. But for the most part, as we've moved further north in the soft red winter wheat crop, it actually looks to be a little bit better, a little more promising for this year's soft red winter wheat crop. And again, with better production, higher production, that helps offset some of the problem areas, not the challenges that maybe we had back in 2019. So I was going to do just a summary over the winter wheat harvest. Soft red winter wheat crop has had some challenges early, but they're seeing good yields and improved quality. Going to need to kind of watch the weather as there's rains that have come in over the last several days through some of the corn belt area that has helped on corn prices. But those same areas are where some soft red winter wheat is still waiting to be harvested. So we'll need to keep an eye on how those fields come in and how the quality, make sure the quality is maintained on those fields. The good news with hard red winter wheat is acreage increase year on year with varying yields throughout the United States, but they are better in the Southern Plains, which will help offset and improve production for the U.S. and hard red winter wheat, specifically with Colorado and Kansas. Harvest is progressing, even though it has been kind of drawn out and slowly not gone quite as fast as we'd like to see it. But it is starting to make progress, and I think we're going to move pretty rapidly up into the northern states, through South Dakota, and even up in the Pacific Northwest, as those dry conditions are leading to that crop being ready for harvest, maybe a little sooner than they would have expected, but hopefully harvest will progress pretty fast. Overall, the solid kernel characteristics with the test weights that the data is showing, even though the theme probably is going to be we've had a lot of variability in the proteins, but proteins are going to be lower year on year for the Southern Plains for what we know now. Think about Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. The hard red winter wheat average is probably more like a 1050 to an 1150. I do think when we get into South Dakota and Montana, you're going to see a lot more 12s and 13s because of the shorter production in drought-stressed areas. So it's going to be interesting to see, even though we have wide protein premiums right now, as we get more protein that comes onto the market, as we get into the northern plains harvest, it'll be interesting to see what happens with those protein spreads. Some discussions that we're having internally in the U.S. with our domestic millers, knowing that there is a lower protein hard red winter wheat crop and that is of better value to them, is can a traditional 12% hard red winter wheat buyer get by with the same quality and better value with like an 1150 or an lower? One of the reasons why we're able to have that discussion, this is a 20-year trend of hard red winter wheat quality proteins, and specifically looking at low volumes going back to 2000. The proteins have trended slightly lower coming out of the Texas Gulf or the Gulf tributary area. A promising note is even with a little bit lower average protein with the hard red winter wheat crop, because of environmental conditions have been very favorable for production in the last 5 years, back to 2016. Higher production, higher yields is inversely proportional with protein, so that's why we've had lower protein quality. Even with lower average proteins, the protein quality has shown an improved upstream in low volumes. So that's why one reason buyers are looking, can they do now with a little bit lower protein content what they were doing 10 years ago, and getting the same protein quality. Just to touch on again why we had good yields in the Southern Plains. Here's a breakdown from the U.S. Wheat Associates website of the different classes and growing regions with hard red winter wheat in the Southern Plains. You can see how it correlated. It was not drought stressed at all, and that's why we had higher yields and a little bit lower protein. These are the problem areas that everyone's kind of keeping an eye on as a production and difficult situation those growers in those areas are because of the drought conditions in the Pacific Northwest and the spring wheat growing areas. It just overlays the winter wheat areas that all of these red areas, the areas of drought in the United States, with the major hard red winter and soft red winter wheat, were actually the opposite. In fact, we did not have those drought areas and actually had too much moisture that may have delayed harvest. So, and one thing that's happening within our domestic market is we're seeing a wide spread in premium between an 11 protein hard red winter wheat and a 13 protein hard red winter wheat on a per bushel basis. Was a 70-cent difference between those two, as the domestic flour milling market is realizing that right now we have shorter availability of these proteins, so that's why proteins are being paid a little bit higher. Also because of the Minneapolis spring wheat futures that are at significant premiums to Kansas City hard red wheat futures. That's almost a $2 premium between spring wheat and hard red winter wheat because of the uncertainty of what will happen with the spring wheat crop and the availability of protein. And so that's another reason why you're seeing the premiums in hard red winter wheat trying to offset the cash price of both spring wheats and winter wheat, and creating some challenges for those that use both, but creating some opportunities in comparison when you can identify some lower value, maybe lower protein hard red winter wheat that is going to mill well and work well for you in the process. Again, the hard red winter wheat values, improved yields, had a little bit lower protein. Looking at an average right now with the Southern Plains of between 11 and 1150 on average. There are pockets of protein, and we're going to see more of it as the harvest progresses in the back half in the northern states. But the lower protein does have good test weight and is creating some value for buyers. Protein premiums that I mentioned, not just domestically, but also in Gulf offers. I know that Shimon is going to touch on that in a little bit. Well, sorry. Protein premiums are going to be probably in the marketplace until we have a lot better handle on what's going on with the spring wheat crop. And that's probably what's really going to drive it, along with the lower average protein this year. What's really driving prices in general, and one reason why you're seeing U.S. wheat values decoupled from world wheat values that you may be seeing, is because the shorter corn balance sheet and that need for feed. U.S. wheat right now is not necessarily pricing itself versus world competitors. And it's actually pricing itself more internally versus feed grains in the U.S. because of the tighter balance sheet and the strong export demand that we've seen, the current export pace that we're seeing with our feed grains. And so even though we have higher quality milling wheat that's actually going into some of these feedlots because of wheat being a cheaper price than corn right now. The offset of that is the pockets of challenge that we mentioned in the earlier quality reports. The high price of feed does give us an outlet for some of those challenges. We keep them from ever entering the commercial channels. With that, I'd just like to say thank you for your time, and please always use us as a resource throughout the year for any of your needs. And appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. I look forward to seeing you all in person very soon. So enjoy the rest of your seminar. Thank you.
Okay, well, good information there by Justin. I apologize for the sound issue. Hopefully the interpreters were able to keep up with that. Miguel, I think we'll try to post a clean version of that on our YouTube channel, and I'll share the link with you, and you can share that with everybody who's been on the call. But some of that data has changed since Justin recorded that. The Kansas crop did get bigger yield-wise. We're up to.
Is Brian not here yet?
No.
Okay.
We are up to 380 million bushel crop, so right at 10 million tons in Kansas. The Oklahoma and Colorado crops also got a little bit bigger, so it is a bigger hard red winter wheat crop with that report that came out on Monday. So this is a nice segue to introduce Sean Campbell. Sean is with the Anderson's Trading Group. He is based out of Kansas City, just a couple hours east of Manhattan here. And there are a lot of interesting market dynamics going on. So I will just turn it over to Sean to discuss some of those. Hi, Sean.
Hi, good morning. So we export out of Texas Gulf, hard red winter and hard red spring wheat. We also export out of Toledo, Ohio, soft red winter wheat. Being that we're in the Texas Gulf, really our harvest started in usually mid-May, a little bit later this year, so end of May, and we're still in the middle of it today. So I thought what I'd do is give a quick overview of what we've seen so far, what we're trying to do, and then where the harvest is today, and then the price relationships where I think that hard red winter can fit into the world market here. So the main theme from end of May all the way until probably 2 weeks ago, we got to central Kansas, very high yielding, and lower pro on average, roughly 11 pro. I would say if you took the big average, just like you guys have seen some of the slides, we're an 11 pro. We have found pockets of sprout for sure in Texas and a few other spots. As Justin mentioned though, feed wheat is a big part of what's going on this year. As a company, we have feed wheat sales onto the feedlot. So we've been able to segregate that low falling number, anything that has sprout, just take it straight to the feedlot. So I don't think I know we won't really have an issue once it actually gets down to the export facilities. Just yesterday, we loaded up some cars. 4 cars had sprout. They went to the feedlot. The good cars went to Texas Gulf. So I think you'll continue to see that happen. The feed's going to be there for the next couple months. By that time, we'll have a really good idea of quality versus not quality that needs to go to the feedlots. You know, once we got into northern Kansas, we started to find some protein. So north central Kansas is should be an 11.5 shipper all year long. South central Nebraska, same way. Northwest Kansas, we started to find some 12s. Colorado, western Nebraska. We're right in the middle of harvest in western Nebraska right now. We're finding some 12s. We can ship 12s out of there. Montana is going to be mid 12s to higher. South Dakota is mid 13s. So it's going to be a crop that we can supply anywhere from 11s up to 13s this year. 13s in smaller quantities, but we can definitely do it. The focus will definitely be 11s. I just ran some numbers here. So, you know, a delivered South American number on average of 11 pro hard winter wheat, $331 a metric ton, versus say Canadian spring wheat 12.5 Pro would be around $400 a ton. So there's some massive savings there on 11 Pro. 12 Pro, while the FOB spread is wide between 12s and 11s, when you compare it to spring wheat, U.S. spring wheat delivered South America to be about $420 a ton. 12 Pro US today would be $350 a ton. So there's still some savings in that 12. Can we do a massive 12 Pro program, 13 Pro program? No, but we can do, combo boats of 12s or full boats of 12s. It's going to be higher price, but in your comparison to where spring wheat's at, and we don't really see the upside on the production in spring wheat. I think there's a couple ways where I think U.S. winter wheat really fits in, and really it's that 11 Pro in volume. That's just going to be a nice, cheap alternative to protein wheats, and then the 12 Pro and 13 Pro at times as more of a direct replacement for West Coast Canadian and East Coast Canadian wheat. Those are really the main things I kind of wanted to hit. Appreciate any questions that you guys have on what else we're seeing. The quality outside, once you got north of Oklahoma, really the Sprout isn't really concerned going north anywhere, so the higher Pro. And like I said, the pockets that there are is definitely manageable, especially with this strong feed-wheat relationship we have right now.
Okay. Have you ever seen this much wheat going to feed in Kansas, Sean?
I haven't. I have not. So the surprising thing is that it's still working today. So there is still new sales, but this is the strongest I've ever seen that relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point to make, though, that you made, is that, while we are seeing some sprout issues, the fact that we are feeding that much wheat, the market's really ready to clean that out and kind of detour that. And so I don't think that's a really big concern quality-wise. No,
and I don't either. And the really nice thing about it is years past, well, that would be a discounted thing. So an origin might be incentive to blend it, right? But the feed value is actually higher. So there's no incentive to keep it at all. The incentive is to get it to a feedlot as quick as possible and get rid of it.
Okay. Miguel, do you have any questions at this point in time for Sean you wanted to bring up? Or?
Thank you, Aaron. No. And thank you, Sean. Quería preguntar.
Sean, I would like to ask our participants if there is a question regarding the brief market analysis that Sean Campbell just gave us, or any questions regarding the technical points that were presented here. I would just like to recap a couple of things. We can see that by and large, the quality has improved with the variety development in the United States. And I would like to highlight that this has happened without using technology of GMO technology. We see quality indicators that are present today in the developers, especially when we think about yield. This is something very important because in the varieties that are developed, well, in the future, the main indicator to give an okay to a variety will be the quality of this variety. We can also see that the protein ranges of hard red winter will be in an average between 11 and 11.5, and some discounts for wheat with less protein. Nonetheless, we see that hard red winter of low protein has a specific weight, and this is better mill yield. And we don't see problems with sprout wheat or falling numbers. There are some pockets where we have seen germination problems because of rainfalls. All all this product is segmented, and due to the great demand that we have today in wheat for feed, it can be easily sent to this market, and we will have no problem during this season. With this recap, I would like to invite our participants to, I don't know, do you have questions? We have people that understand a lot about wheat, and we want to make the best of this opportunity. We have a raised hand here. Don José.
No sé si nos escucha José Manso.
Can you hear us, Mr. Jose Manso?
Hey, Miguel, we're gonna, if you don't mind, we can take that. Do you have the question now? Otherwise, we have our farmers standing
Going
by.
here like this? Yes. Okay.
Do you mind, Miguel? We'll take that question in a second and go to, I want to introduce Brian Lennon. Brian is a farmer. He's also on our wheat commission board. He is in the extreme northwestern corner of Kansas in Goodland, Kansas, and he is doing harvest right now. So good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Aaron. Thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here today. We started cutting wheat here in northwest Kansas about 10 days ago, and we've been seeing lower than normal test weights. Our test weights are running in the 57, 58 pound per bushel range. Yields are very good. Our yields have been probably averaging 60 to 95 bushel an acre. And proteins have been high this year. Most of our proteins are over 13% protein. And we've seen some as high as 14.8 and 14.9% protein. Harvest is going well for us. We're about half done, and we're cutting about 30 miles south of Goodland today, and we'll be moving over into Colorado to cut later this afternoon and probably be there for about another week, and that should pretty much wrap up our harvest. Acres are definitely down in the area in terms of wheat acres, but the production is going to be good this year because we've had the right weather conditions to grow, a lot of bushels with good protein and good milling quality wheat.
Okay, so how far behind are you on harvest, Brian? I know you've been delayed by a couple of rainfalls, which is, you never want to turn away rain, but I think it has impacted you.
Oh yeah, so normally we would have been done probably 3 or 4 days ago, and we've got about a week left. So we're about 10 days behind normal. And just like it's been almost every day, this morning it's cloudy and overcast and the humidity's high. And so you can't really cut wheat when it's like that. You have to wait till the humidity goes down and the sun comes out, and then you can cut.
Okay. And the lower test weight, you probably attribute that to the fact that the mature wheat got rained on a couple of times?
More so, I would say about 3 weeks ago, we had that real hot, dry spell right when the wheat was filling, and it was over 100 degrees, and we had, moderate to high winds in the 25 to 35 mile per hour range, and that dried down the wheat during fill, and so it shriveled some of those kernels and made the test weight a little bit light.
But that also probably accounts for some of the higher protein at the same time.
That's right. Yeah, the protein test weight issue is always a little bit of a trade-off, and so if you end up giving up a pound or two in test weight, usually you gain 2 or 3 points in proteins. An average crop for us, we'd be over 60 pounds in test weight, but we would probably be in the 11.5 to 13 range in protein rather than being up in the 14s. So it's a trade-off for sure.
Yeah, it's an amazing crop. Some of you online may have heard that it has 9 lives like a cat. We tried to kill it many times in Kansas, and in May, early May, Brian, I think you were in a pretty bad drought situation, weren't you?
We were. the field that we're cutting now down in Wallace County, I was telling Marshall on the combine last night, we expected it to be some of our worst wheat. We drilled it into dry conditions last year, did not get a good stand. And in fact, we were out looking at it in late October, November, and trying to decide if we should tear it up or re-drill it. We decided not to. And we got a little bit of rain in March, and then we got good rains in May, but it was dry up before that. And we really didn't think we were going to have much of a wheat crop. I was regretting that we'd even planted all the acres we planted. And now that wheat that we're cutting down in Wallace County is making about 60 or 65 bushel. And I mean, that's a miracle considering how that wheat looked last fall. It didn't look good at all, but wheat's just one of those crops that it's very resilient. It's made for an arid climate like what we have out here, and it just comes on. If you get a little bit of rain, it comes on.
Okay. I'm going to, while I'm talking to you here, I'm going to show a little video of some harvest footage that Marcia took yesterday. But Romulo was talking earlier today about how fertility plays an important role in yield and quality. So tell us about, your fertility program. You put a lot of nitrogen on your wheat, I assume.
Yeah, so our program is, well, first our rotation is we grow wheat, and then we no-till corn into the wheat stubble, and then we use tillage after the corn stalks. We till all summer, and we apply anhydrous ammonia late in the summer with our sweeps, and we usually put about 110 to 120 pounds of N on per acre, and then we plant our wheat, and then in the early spring when it comes up in March, we'll top dress with another, anywhere from 10 to 30 pounds of N. This year we went with 30 pounds because we were starting to get that rain and our wheat was starting to look good. And so we put on N with our fungicide application. And well, no, that's wrong. We top dress for weed control, for herbicide control, and we put on some N then. We put on about 20 or 30 pounds there, and then we put on another 30 pounds when we applied fungicide in late May. Yeah. And after we'd had the moisture and knew we were going to have some success there. And so we try to push it pretty hard on the wheat yield and the quality. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we have pretty good protein this year, is because we have the fertility out there that the plant will produce, higher protein wheat. Yeah.
Well, and that certainly falls under the definition of intensive management that Romulo was talking about. So finally, Brian, as part of Kansas Wheat and U.S. Wheat Associates, you've traveled around the world and understand the importance of trade. Anything you want to say to our customers in South America?
When we're growing wheat, we're thinking about the world market, and it's important to us that we produce a quality product that can be used throughout the world for milling and baking and creating, bread and cookies and pastas and noodles and things like that. And, that's really our focus. Is we're trying to produce the best quality wheat that we can, good test weight, high protein, good milling quality. And the hard thing about that for producers is that we can't test all that stuff. It's hard for us to even market our crop because we don't know what the test weight and the protein is going to be until we pull in there with a combine and haul it to an elevator, to a storage facility where it can be tested. So, we do everything we can, but we're relying a lot on Mother Nature too to make things right for us so that our wheat's good quality for everybody in the world. We know that half or more of our crop here in Kansas gets exported throughout the world, and so it's important to us that we keep a good name and we provide good quality, and that's what we're always trying to do.
Okay, great, thanks, Brian. And the technology is changing too. Just in the last few months, a new piece of technology has emerged about the size of a loaf of bread. It's a mobile protein tester, so that farmers can now. It's a very expensive piece of equipment right now, but you can take a few kernels, put it on a little glass plate, and in a matter of seconds it tells us the protein. So that's the kind of technology that's going to be a game changer and even elevate more the product that we can export to our customers. So stand by, Brian, if you would. We might have some questions come your way, but
Sure.
Appreciate your time this morning and hopefully you have a few good dry days for harvest. So
Yeah, thank you.
sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Brian.
Sorry
Thank
for
you,
the
Brian,
interruption.
and good luck with the harvest.
Thank you.
No,
You're welcome.
don't worry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, to continue, we have a couple of questions here in the chat. I am checking here. 1 second. First, and maybe Sean can help us with that. What is the FOB price today, Sean, for hard winter? Let's talk about 11% protein, FOB Gulf today.
So FOB Gulf today would be, let me check futures here, it's written down, to about 285 a metric ton.
285 a metric ton, and freight rates, we are seeing freight rates variable, but
yeah, I pulled Peru just because I had that up, and we're showing $43 to Peru. So
okay.
285
plus 43.
Like 328.
Perfecto. Thank you. Don Edgar Monserrate, 338 aproximadamente, puesto
338 approximately.
Correct, costo y flete, ¿no?
Yes.
Precio
Cost
FOB
and freight. FOB price
will be $285 por
will
tonelada.
be $285 per metric ton.
Perfecto.
Perfect.
We have another question here. What are, for Sean as well, and maybe Aaron can also give us his impression. What are the perspectives, price-wise, for wheat corn spread and wheat demand for feeding in the upcoming months?
So currently the price, where the competition is the Texas Panhandle. I just ran that. So we are about, 2 months ago, we were probably 75% in the value of corn. Today, we're about 95% in the value of corn. So it's narrowed and it's closer. But once these guys get on the ration, they're going to want to finish that ration out and stay on wheat. So they'll continue to put it on at 95%. Most guys would never start at 95%, but since they're on, they'll continue to at least finish that ration and at least get to middle of September, October before the new corn crop comes off. So that's where we see it starting to fall off. We should see a transition away sometime in September. But those Texas Gulf numbers are something like corn, or not Texas Gulf, I'm sorry, Texas Panhandle, corn like a 260 a metric ton and wheat around 250 a metric ton.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for the good info, Sean. I think Mr. Nelson Montaña, that answer involves all your question. Another additional question, Sean, for you that is related with our region. For this second semester, we see first a important amount of wheat that is going to come from Russia, maybe to our region. We also see Argentina with high stocks because they have not sold during the first semester what they usually sell in our market. We see Argentina offering wheat for August and September that in the past that was not common in our region. And considering those points, do you think that will put pressure to hard winter prices during the second semester, or you don't see any relation with that?
I think the pressure comes from now through September, to be honest, just because of the flows in the country. So from the interior of the U.S., there's going to be corn crop looks okay in the center of the country. Fall crops in general, there's a lot to handle. So I think we'll see a little more pressure on the front end. October through December is just a really hard time for us to load wheat, to convince the origins in the country to load wheat because they're dealing with the fall crops. So I don't think we'll really see much pressure or much push to try to get a lot of wheat out October through December.
Okay.
January through May, I think we'll be willing sellers, but it feels like by the time we get there, Russia will not be very cheap. Argentina shouldn't be very cheap. So I think we'll have access to a lot of markets the last half of the marketing year.
Excelente, excelente. Well, thank you for your comments, Sean. Estimados participantes, no sé si alguien más tuviera alguna pregunta. Aquí veo
do you
otra
have any
pregunta.
further questions to address to our foreign speakers?
No. Ya fueron contestadas las preguntas que tenemos en
They
el
have
chat.
been answered, the ones that at least were made through the chat.
Bueno, si no
Very
tenemos ninguna otra
Having no
consulta,
further questions or comments,
I want to thank again Aaron Harris, Mike Schulte, Dr. Romulo Lollato, and Steve Campbell for all your support in this important event for us. And a special thank you also to Justin Gilpin that he took time to record his video before leaving the office. And again, Aaron, thank you very much you for coordinating everything, for preparing the agenda. And muchísimas gracias a todos nuestros participantes.
thank you all to all our participants.
Les recordamos a todos nuestros
We would like to
clientes
remind all our customers
que US Wheat publica
that
información
US
semanal de
Wheat
mercado
Associates publishes weekly information on market.
y adicionalmente a partir de este
additionally,
mes
from this month onwards,
hemos empezado a
we
instalar
have
los equipos,
started to install the equipment
los equipos de nuestro laboratorio de reología en Santiago
of
de
our
Chile.
rheology lab in Santiago, Chile.
Y esto, el objetivo principal
And
será
the major purpose will be to
desarrollar propuestas de valor para nuestros
value
clientes utilizando
propositions
trigo de
to
los
our
Estados
customers
Unidos
using
en la
US wheat
formulación.
in the formulation.
Ok, muchísimas
Okay,
gracias.
thank
Thank
you
you very
so
much
much.
to all participants and have an excellent day. Muchas gracias, Claudia, también por todo.
Muchas gracias a todos ustedes.